out here. For anybody tuning in who doesn't know or is tuning into the stream for the first time, my name is Matt Ryan, and I'm Mr. ADHD Games. And what I do is from 7:30 to 10:30 2 nights a week, we play games and just chat and have fun. And then at 9 o'clock, we take a break and we focus on ADHD and mental health. And we talk about it for 30 to 40 minutes and just kind of talk about something specific to it. But the month of November, every Tuesday and Thursday, instead of chatting, we're actually going to do interviews with some really amazing people. Because I've met some super awesome people since I've realized a lot more about myself and I'm more comfortable admitting I have ADHD. And I've found some great people who I'm always amazed to find out they have ADHD. And these are three people that are absolutely amazing that I love when I get to spend time with. Um, this is Faith, Katie, and Tug. I will let all of you give a short introduction about yourselves. Faith, you can go first.
Yep. Okay.
Sure. I'll start. My name is Faith. I don't even know what to say. I'm 39. I'm gonna be 40 in like 2 months. I run a gaming convention. I have a kid. He'll be 6 tomorrow. And I discovered late in life that I had ADHD. I lived my whole life with my quirks. I just thought that was who I was, and it was how I functioned, and I didn't realize there was a name for
That's great. That was a perfect introduction. See, you didn't know what to say? It sounded like you'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. Nailed it. All right, Katie, why don't you go next?
Okay. My name is Katie. I am, oh my gosh, am I 36 or 37? Somebody quick. Tug, how old am I?
You're young, bitch. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we allowed to curse?
Yeah.
Yes, we already covered that. Oh yeah.
And I made a great joke.
I can't remember. I'm either 36 or 37.
You're 37, honey.
Am I really?
Yeah, it's fine.
Are you sure? Hold on. Anyways, I'm worth those ages.
Weren't you born in 84?
85.
Okay, then you're gonna be 37 in a couple of months, honey.
January. Yeah. So I'm 36.
Currently.
For now. Just for now.
Okay. I was, so for several years, I was misdiagnosed. I had been treated for a number of things. They thought depression was kind of the biggest one. I was treated for depression, and it was always weird because it never really, like, anything I was doing to treat depression never really worked. And then finally, I found an amazing therapist and an amazing doctor, and they were like, girl, you have ADHD. This is what this is. And that happened also a little bit later in life.
All right, Tug.
Hi, my name is Tug. I am 37. I also help coordinate Werewolf ATL with Miss Faith here. And I was diagnosed with ADHD about 2 years ago. And coincidentally, it was actually during a conversation with Katie, where Katie was talking about her ADHD. And so me, Katie, and Faith are having, or I'm sorry, me, Katie, and Felix are having a conversation. And then I was like, ha 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 ha, based on that, I'm ADHD. And then they both were like, yeah, why do you think we call you Squirrel? And then I was like, oh, I think you guys were kidding. And then, like, it just dawned on me.
So did you go to a doctor, like, within mind that you were like, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD? Or was it something that, that you, like, your doctor suggested to you?
So I am the kind of person that I feel like I have to know, like I can't just leave things unknown like that. However, I am very paranoid about putting medicine in my body that I don't necessarily need. So I found like neurological psychologist that tests for ADHD and things of that sort. And so like I remember doing the first part of the test where like they do like an IQ thing, and then he's like, you're in the 98th percentile, and then like a lot of the tasks he's like, you're in the third percentile. So like that gap right there between your IQ and your ability to perform some of these tasks. So before it was even over, he was like, listen, it's still going to take me a few weeks and you still have to answer 300 questions, but you are severely ADHD, just like.
Yeah, one thing about I just mental health and ADHD in general is like ADHD. It's so hard to go through the mental health system the way it's set up. Like it feels like a trudge to like find a good doctor and find someone who wants to listen to actually what's going on. It's kind of, at least that's my experience with it. I don't know if you all have had
Oh,
similar experiences.
absolutely. I think it's such a weird it's a weird journey to go on anyways because I mean I know it manifests differently in different people, but one of the things that I deal with a lot in having ADHD is like things that should be very very simple for other people feel just extremely overwhelming for me. And so it was such a battle to like find a doctor and to get a diagnosis because the the tasks of having to like look for a doctor and then have the conversation and then like just all of it gets to be like so overwhelming that several times I would just stop because I would be like, "Oh my gosh, there's too many names on this list or too many numbers on this list to call or now I have to deal with my insurance and are they going to cover this medication?" And so you know, several times I would just be like, it's too much for my brain, and my brain would feel like static, and the static would just drown out the task of having to do it, and I would just walk away from it. And it wasn't until like it was actually Garrett shortly after we were married that he finally was like, "You've we've got to," and he just sat down with me and he was like, "If you can't make the phone call, I will make the phone call. We will get there." And so it took a minute, but we got there.
That sounds awesome. It's great to have a support system in place. I know that, um, I mean, just anybody who is like willing to listen to you and support you is huge when you have ADHD because you already feel so much that you have to shout more to be heard. Um, one of the things you said that I really like because it's how I always felt is like watching all these other people do things that just seemed easy to them and like putting myself, because I wanted to make sure that I could do it, I would put myself through so much more and I would just be exhausted after like my mentally drained after doing these things and I just didn't feel good. Um so Faith, I want to ask you a question. When you were growing up, were there what were do you can you recall things where you're like, "Oh yeah, that was ADHD," or like that was something that happened because of ADHD, just like growing up and going through school and stuff?
Um, really reflected on things that happened to me or things that I did in my childhood. I remember, and I don't. Okay, and one thing is I don't really remember a lot, but I remember my mom always saying this story about when I was in um, Catholic school. I went to Catholic school for 1 year. It was just a
Oh.
thing that we did in the South. We're not Catholic.
Okay, okay.
Um, and so I remember that she used to say, tell me the story about how I got in trouble because I couldn't sit still. And there were cinder block painted walls, and I would trace like the lines in the cinder block, and like I couldn't like stop moving. And like back then, they were allowed to paddle you, in Catholic school, that was a thing. The father used to walk around with this big wooden paddle. It was a thing. I got paddled. Um, and now I think back on that and I'm like, you know what? That's probably what that was. It was like just different things throughout my life I reflect back on.
Yeah, and stuff like that's challenging because then it gives kind of gives us a barrier that we have to overcome because then when we see either and as someone with children, like seeing kids acting up with ADHD, that's how we want to react because that's how we were reacted to. And so we have to kind of stop it and say, "Okay, I need to be the adult. I understand what's going on." So, but it's hard because your first reaction wants to be like, "Well, I turned out okay, so I should react the way that I was reacted to." But yeah, it's great, especially I know that with me, I'm always watching Evie, even at this point, for like flags or signs that she might have ADHD because it is genetic. I mean, it's something that I can think back and I know for a fact my mom had it, and I watched her struggle. I watched her struggle with like drug abuse and a bunch of other things, because ADHD minds are more prone to addiction. I mean, that dopamine push, we're just generally more prone to addiction. Um,
Yep. Impulse control.
Oh yeah, and so I never got to really get good perspective on what it was to be a woman with ADHD. So, Tug, if you wouldn't mind just giving me, I'll have all of you go, but I want to make each of you go individually. But Tug, I'll let you go first. Just help me, give me some insight into maybe why you think women aren't diagnosed as much, because there's no genetic reason that men and women should have different amounts. It should be equal, but it's very much not diagnosed equally.
Um, I think that part of that actually has to do with uh, partially by stereotypes. Actually, I think that when you think about women, like people always say like, oh, women are so scatterbrained and like forgetful, and like women are bad drivers. And so I think there are a lot of things that we attribute to women when it's probably women with like ADHD. And I also think that women are very prone to like multitasking and doing multiple things at the same time and having a lot of expectations. And so I think that a lot of times women get busy being moms, being wives, doing all these things, and don't take the, like, when I actually thought about it, I was like, how did I not know? Right? Like, because I'm somebody that's very aware of my body. And so, like, when I'm not feeling well or something is off, like, I'm aware of that. And so, once I learned what ADHD was, I was like, oh, that makes sense. But I think that women, to a certain degree, feel like we always kind of feel like we're on the go when we have a million things to do, when we're running here and doing that. And I think that lifestyle becomes so common that it's a normal thing, and you don't realize that not everybody struggles as much as you do.
So,
And I
so
think it's hard for successful women too.
So you feel like it's something where it's just what's expected? Like more like women, it's expected that they have all these tasks and all these things, and things are harder for them. That's awful. I really hope we can break that stigma. I'm glad we're talking about it here, because yeah, I think that yeah, there should be no expect because that feeling is awful. Like to feel like you have more than you can do and you still have to do it. Like that feeling is gut wrenching. So Katie, can you give me some insight into being a woman with ADHD, or like a perspective thing that you think is unique about being a woman with ADHD?
Yeah, I think just I mirror a lot of what Tug said. It's like I remember there's been a lot of times too, because like the other thing that women are attributed to, right, is like you hear all the time, like, well, men think with their brains and women think with their hearts, and they're just very emotional and da da da. Da. So like there was a lot of like so I do a thing where I will overextend myself because I want to be a part of everything, and I have the worst FOMO, and I think a lot of people, when they're talking about me, they believe that I'm an extrovert, and I'm not. I am definitely very introverted, because while I love being around people and I love the company and I love being involved, I have to take a step back in order to recharge. And that's what an introvert does. Like you have to recharge alone, and that's how your battery fills so that you can then go spend it on other things. Um, so I would overextend myself, overextend myself. And then I remember there were several times in my previous marriage where I would hit that moment of crashing, where I was just like, I can't, my brain can't anymore. It's static. I need to recharge my battery. I'm done. I'm out. And I remember when I would hit those lulls, and I would have to just kind of isolate myself for a couple of days. I regularly heard like, "Are you on your period? Like you're so moody. You seem so impatient." Da, da, da. So like I think a lot of it too is kind of again like that stereotype of like, well, if you're a woman who's like behaving what people would consider erratically or whatever, then like it's hormones. You're hormonal. I read something not too long ago talking about how many women are misdiagnosed with postpartum depression. And they've started coming around to looking at it and realizing, like, oh, it didn't go away. So maybe it's not postpartum depression. Oh, it's ADHD. But when you become a new mom and you have, like Tug said, the job, the parenting, the wifing, the social circle, it gets to be a lot. And it can kick whatever ADHD is there up into like hyperdrive. Because now you've got, another human to take care of, which is a whole nother, mess of tasks. But yeah, a lot of women are misdiagnosed with like postpartum depression but it's really like ADHD. And if your ADHD isn't being treated appropriately, or you're not aware of it, it can make you depressed, right? Like, if you don't understand what your brain is doing or why you can't perform at the level of somebody else at a certain thing, like, yeah, it can leave you feeling pretty depressed.
Absolutely. No, that's really good insights. I think that especially that introvert, like recharging your battery when you're by yourself is like a big thing because I don't know. I feel like I drive the line between introvert and extrovert sometimes, but yeah, I think the idea of like when you charge your battery is like if you charge your battery around people, you're an extrovert. If you charge your battery by yourself, you're an introvert. I think that's a really cool thing. All right, Faith, give me some insight. What do you got? Oh, you
Say,
oh, there you go.
oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. There's a lot of stigma around mental health. I remember growing up, I had a cousin, and I don't know, ADD and ADHD are the same thing, but I remember she had it, and I remember she was on Ritalin, and I remember it was such like a taboo thing in our family, and you grow up with that sense of, oh, don't be like her. People will talk about you behind your back. It's a bad thing. And so as you grow up, when you think of these things and you're like, oh, it's just a quirk, it's fine. It's just something I do. Also, my particular lane of ADHD is I thrive in chaos. And so I actually have a job that like is literally tailored to that. And that's why I do well in the job, is because everything has to be burning down before I can jump into action. Let's say I have 10 hours to do something. 9 hours and 30 minutes later is when I'm in drive, and I do it and I get it done. But my body and my mind will not let me move until things are burning down, until it's the last minute, until I'm forced to. And I also, I mean, I don't know it. You think about these things and you think about them as multitasking, and you kind of praise yourself for them, and you're like, oh, I'm really good at this because I can do 10 things at once. Well, none of those 10 things get done because I'm doing them all at once. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go put a load of clothes in the laundry, and I do that, but I never turn it on, or I never put the actual washing powder in there because I saw something on the floor that took my attention away, and now I'm doing that thing. I'm like, oh yeah, that reminds me, I need to go order this, and now I'm in my computer, and now I'm on Facebook for 10 hours, and
And then it's done.
then that day is done. Just making lists because I can't retain information when I have a lot coming at me. You should see my desk right now. I live in chaos. I mean, I'm going to like let you guys in on my shame. Like
No,
literally, I strive in
But
chaos.
if people were to
This
that, I
all
would
the
have.
sticky notes. I have 100 and a million sticky notes because I have to write things down. I have
I
lists
always give them.
for everything, and then I make
same,
lists for those lists and
same.
reminders because I can't remember. So it's a lot. And I just always thought that this was all right. Like, what's wrong with this? Everybody lives like this, right? Until I saw like a video on TikTok once when I went into a TikTok hole for 10 hours. And it was like this lady who was doing these things. And I was like, oh, that's me. Like, and she was like, life with adult ADHD. And I was like, oh my God, this is a thing. Is a name for it. So yeah.
Everybody in chat is giving you a lot of love for your desk. They're saying they love your chaos and it looks just like their desks.
It's
So,
organized in my like it's where it needs to be, and that's what I tell
See,
people. Like, please don't touch my shit. Please don't clean it. My
I,
mom tries to do that. I'm like, don't do that because I will never find anything. It's organized in my way.
oh yeah, it's
see, I'm
exactly where it's supposed to be to me.
I'm the exact opposite. Like, I have to, have to, have to, have to have like I can't. I hate clutter. Like it's fine if it's your clutter, Tug. But like I could not. I would if that were my desk. Listen, no shame, Faith. But if that were my desk, I would be like, we have to throw the desk away. We have to burn the room. It cannot exist. This room is dead to me. Wall it up. We're done. And like, if it's not because my brain will then hyperfixate on that. Like that's all I'll see. And until that is clear, that is all my brain will focus on. And like, I wanted to talk to, like, we were talking about lists and like, who else is a list keeper? Like, I make a million lists. Yeah.
I got a little book
Yep.
that I have like all kinds of lists in.
And then
Just any
reminders
list.
the list, and then reminders to remind you to remind.
Yep. Yep. We do this all the time. Yep. So I had a really interesting
Lists,
conversation with
lists.
Garrett last night because Garrett, or not last night, it was like 2 nights ago. And Garrett, my husband, he was off and I was at home with COVID, so I couldn't do anything. I was like quarantined and like whatever. And I stepped out of the room for a moment to go to the kitchen and saw my house and was like, I've been in my room for 3 days and this is what has happened because Lyric has been running around fending for themselves and Garrett is a dude who doesn't care. So I was just like, oh no. And I came back into the room and Garrett came in and he was like, are you okay? Like, you seem not okay. And I was like, it's just real bad out there. And he's like, I know. And I'm going to get it clean before you're out of quarantine. And I was like, mm-mm. It needs to be clean now. And if you don't want to do it, I'll go do it, but it's got to be done. And he went and did it. But the list thing. So that day, I was like, okay, I'm going to make a list of all the things that I need to get done. Like either that I need to do or that I need Garrett's help with or whatever. I'm just going to make this list because that's who I am as a person. And I sent it to Garrett the next morning so that he would have this itinerary. And I just watched him throughout the day, like, just feel like you could tell he was just so deflated and like he was not enjoying his day off at all. And like, not all of it was like errands or anything crazy because when I make lists, it's detailed. So it's never just clean the kitchen, it's wipe down the counters, do the dishes, you know, sweep the floors. Like every little bit is on there. And we had a conversation where I was just like, do lists help you? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, because when I get a list, I feel like, oh, good, this is organized for me. I can check things off. It helps direct my ADHD brain. But like we talked about it, and for him, lists just feel like he looks at them and it's just like, that's too much. I can't. And so it just instantly feels overwhelming. And he was like, so we talked about it. He was like, no, I think lists are actually like not helpful for me. And I was like, so I'm just going to verbally tell you what things I think need to get done today. And that's going to be enough for you. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I don't get it, but okay. And so we've recently agreed that he will no longer get my 3-page lists so as to avoid feeling overwhelmed. I
Yeah,
thought it was interesting that something that helps me so much could be so overwhelming for somebody else.
anytime I've been at a restaurant and I've seen a server not write down my table's order and go away from the table, I'm like, is that person a god? I think that person must be a god. It's just like that couldn't happen. Like I could never do that. Like they wouldn't get any food. They would get they don't know what they get.
It comes back right most of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
like,
and they bring your
bring
food.
the order back to me.
You're a fucking food wizard. They bring it to the table. It's right.
Yeah, it's
Food
like
wizard.
so some people don't need a list, you know? Some people don't need a list.
You took 10 whole steps from here to the register and you didn't forget this?
Yeah,
you know
it's
that
like
little game or that test where they like give you a list of things in order and they're like repeat it back. Two things in and I'm like, I don't know what else you said. I'm sorry. That's gone now.
yeah, the list is no longer there. It's gone.
Is it something that I'm gonna need? No. Can I tell you guys the worst story? Every fucking summer, Like the last 2 weeks of summer, I would get in trouble because I would forget my fucking times tables. And I would have to sit at this stupid fucking desk while my mom cleaned the house. And I would have to say, like, memorize my times tables. And like it got to the point where like my mom's like, there's got to be something wrong with your memory, like this cannot be like. But it's so funny because like my mom didn't know what ADHD was. Never in a million years would she think to go get me diagnosed. I've had moments where I would literally forget. I My dating life isn't going well, but then again, I was on the phone with a guy the other day, literally forgot he was on the phone with me because I was multitasking. And then I was like, oh wait. And then he's like, did you just forget I was here? And I was like, yeah.
No.
And
Mm.
it's okay. He thought it was endearing.
See, yeah, you
Definitely
just gotta
forgot he
find
was.
someone who finds it endearing. I mean, I know that I have plenty of quirks that I'm sure that my partner doesn't enjoy, but it's just kind of part of who we end up being, and you gotta kind of be happy with it. So I'm gonna ask a weird question, and I none of you have to answer it, but it's something I want more perspective on, and I know Katie touched on it a little bit. Um, but tell me about ADHD and your period, menstruating. I imagine that having those two things at the same time is challenging because having one of them is challenging. I know from experience, but I've never had both. So I was hoping that I could get a little insight because I just feel like I send so much sympathy out to you all for having to deal with that.
Matt, you
Thank
just
you.
opened such a shit show of a box. None of us are regular. Like, also, we're synced, so that's wonderful. But all of us have different shit show situations in the first place. So I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, which makes that not that fun or great because of my hormones. And then on top of that, my ADHD. Then Katie, what do you
Yep.
have?
I had cervical and uterine cancer, and so it messes with all of that too. Yep.
Mm.
Yep. It's
Similar to polycystic ovarian syndrome, I have fibroids on my uterus. There was a huge one actually when I was pregnant, and had it been in a different spot, they would have had to terminate my pregnancy.
dang.
Um, yeah, it was, grace of God. It was at the top, and they were like, okay, it's not going to block the birth canal. You're okay. After you give birth, you probably want to see about having surgery. Of course, I never did because, but yeah, and so heavy periods, heavy PMS, heavy everything, whatever craziness I normally go through, multiply that times 10 during that week.
Plus the
Yeah.
chronic fatigue, which and it's this is something that I like struggle with. I can never tell if I'm like I'm tired because you know I'm low on iron. I can't tell if I'm tired because I'm like overextending myself with the ADHD, or like I and it's funny too because so I also have depression and anxiety. And since I've been treated for ADHD, it all kind of goes hand in hand. I've seen that I can manage those other things better. But it's just really funny how like physical things and mental things can all just like pinball off of each other. And I know that like especially during that time of the month for me, I feel like I'm extra scatterbrained, and it's kind of weird because one of the things that I didn't know was an ADHD things like if I'm usually a very articulate person, but if I'm in a situation where I'm trying to explain something and I get overwhelmed, I will literally lose words. And like my brain will literally get very frustrated because I feel like I'm not being understood or able to articulate myself. And so that looks like, oh, like she's just being a bitch, she's PMSing, but it's actually because like I'm tired or I feel like I'm not able to express myself. And so it's just again kind of like falls into certain stereotypes, but it's yeah, like one thing definitely affects all these other things and how your day flows.
I agree. Yeah. I think the thing that I have recently had to kind of start getting better about navigating when I know that like it's about to be that time of the month, because like even without ADHD, right? Like you have all these expectations, you have a life, you have all these things you have to do, and like I can't speak for everybody, but certainly like, like you said, like I just get exhausted. And like like hormones are a real thing, and we can deny PMS all we want, but like the other day when I got snippy with Tug, it's because I was on my period. So like it's a real thing, and like your hormones are kicked up and you're drained and zapped physically. And so like the already overwhelming and like daunting day, if you're having like a super ADHD day coupled with all of that, is just it can be really overwhelming sometimes. And I have been really bad at like showing myself some grace. Like I feel like, again, I'm a list maker, and if I do not check everything off that list, oh, it's a bad day. It doesn't matter how many awesome things happened that day. If I did not check it off the list, it was a bad day and I failed. And so I noticed that I'm having a lot more of those days around like my period. And so I've had to start reminding myself, like giving myself that moment of quiet to step away from everything and just address what I'm actually feeling, because it gets really easy to react as opposed to respond to situations or people or whatever. So I give myself that few minutes away, and then usually I'm able to go, oh, okay, this is ADHD, and also you're on your period or about to be on your period. You need to just like, you need a minute. Just give yourself a minute. And usually I can do it, but reminding myself, like, hey, you're a person, and it's okay to not do all the things all the time.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Chat's showing you a lot of love. There's giving you some hearts in there. But yeah, that's actually the you guys gave me the perspective I wanted on it, because I don't know. It just in my mind I remember like going through high school and like everybody's like, "Oh, she's on her period." And I'm just like, that's a terrible thing to say. Like, why do people have to walk around and say things like that? And I don't know. I just like I'm imagining having ADHD and trying to hide that and mask it. Not to say I say hide it, but they refer to it as masking it. But yeah, trying to hide those weird ticks you have or the weird things you do, or bouncing your leg in class because it's going to annoy everybody, or clicking a pen because everyone's going to turn around and look at you. And then on top of that, having to deal with like just your hormones not being in sync, not being how they usually are. It's super props to all of you. So give
Okay.
me something that is super awesome since you found out you have ADHD. Just one thing that you'd say like is probably the best thing that's happened since you found out you had ADHD.
I mean, for me, it's been I noticed I've noticed that after getting a proper diagnosis, the company that I keep is a lot different. Like I have gravitated towards, and the people who have gravitated towards me tend to be a lot of people who have the same like idiosyncrasies or ticks or whatever. And I mean, like, I think it's probably a lot of why Tug and I are so close, and why Faith and I are friends, and why Tug and Faith are friends, and why some of our other friends who are undiagnosed that are still in denial, why we're friends. It's because, like, you, you find the people who get you, right, and who understand you. And if you're somebody living with ADHD, especially as an adult, like it can be really difficult to be understood. And like Tug said, I've always struggled with feeling understood too. Like I repeat myself a lot, and people are like, "I'm not stupid. I heard you." And it's like, but I need to know that you get what I'm saying, because I get that the way my brain works is weird. So I think for me, the best thing has been like finding my people, right? Like you find your people once that diagnosis is there, once you understand what it is that makes you, helps inform who you are. And that's been probably the biggest blessing that's happened since.
Kelly Bean says they know that you're talking about them.
Oh, I am.
All right, Faith, what's the best thing since you've realized you had ADHD? What's the best thing that's happened or that you've learned?
Uh, well, I would also mirror what Katie said, finding my people, but also I feel like knowing it and not thinking it's just something that, a quirk of mine, I'm able to at least sort of prepare, but I don't know. My husband can brace himself. Like I go to him and I'm like, okay, we know this is going to happen. Like I live in a world of unfinished things, and so what he'll now come behind me and he'll do, and he'll finish them for me. And it's just that all before I just lived, it was just like, oh, why can't you just finish that? I'm in my renovated office that I never actually finished renovating. And it's I live, yeah, everything in my house is unfinished. We painted the garage, never finished it. Just things that just never get done. I replaced my own mailbox a few days ago, never finished it. I mean, I got the mailbox on the post, but then there's the little address part that like sits on top, and I was like, yeah, I'll figure that out later. Um, but now he'll come back behind me, now that we've had these conversations about, this is a real thing, has a name. This is how I am. I will try my best, and I take a lot of medications because I also have congestive heart failure. So it's like I didn't want to take more medication. So I'm like, I feel like I can manage it. I've been managing it all my life. But at least now I know what it is, and I can, plan for it. I can do things, and that alone helps me a lot. Just knowing these things. It's like going in with the expectations that this is probably not going to get finished and plan for that. And then what do we do when we know it's not going to get finished? And so that helps versus just being there and like, oh God, this is not done. What do I do? So
All right, Tug, what do you got?
Um, I think that so when I was diagnosed, I kind of mourned like, when I heard what ADHD was and the symptoms, I was kind of sad because I was like, oh, is my whole entire personality just being ADHD? But I kind of got lucky, right? Because like now I have two amazing friends who are also ADHD, and it's kind of weird because like we're all very creative, but we're all very creative in very different ways. And so like we all have unique things that like we share, and but like we all have things that are very different. And I think for me, one of the coolest things was to see like how ADHD, because we think about it as a disability, but like how ADHD actually makes the amazing people I know amazing. I think I love seeing people that are like succeeding and awesome at what they do because they're ADHD and because they have that creative side and because they get so obsessed with one thing. So I think, yeah, definitely like seeing women with ADHD thrive and be awesome and find their like little niche and what makes them them. So
That's awesome. No, that's really, really great. I love that. Those are all superb answers. Faith,
I have a question for you, Matt.
the chat was to be give you props for the quote. I live in a world of unfinished things. A lot of people are relating with that statement.
And I guess for all three of you, I'm really curious because Faith, when you were talking about what you were talking about, something dawned on me. What is your like, for lack of a better term, what is your love language?
So it depends. It's
yeah, go ahead, you
changed.
do it, Matt, because I
It's
don't know.
it's depend for me. So it's kind of changed throughout me growing up. Like it used to be a lot more just like showing I care like physically, and now it's a lot more just like making sure things I show I care a lot more, and one of my love languages taking care of a lot of things because I know it's a
What is
challenge for me.
what love language do you understand? Like, how would you prefer somebody like, because like you speak a love language and you understand a love language. So like the reason I ask is because Faith, when you were talking about how your husband comes in behind you and finishes your unfinished things, because Garrett and I talked a lot about this before we got married, and my love language is definitely acts of service. And I never made the connection between that being my love language and having ADHD until you were saying that. But it's that feeling of, again, I have all these things I want to do or need to do or get excited about doing or projects that I've started and they don't get finished, which then makes my anxiety kick into overdrive. But having a husband or a friend or whoever who comes behind you and loves you well and knows to like help finish those things has always been like a huge benefit. So I was just curious, like, I wonder how many people with ADHD would like say that they believe their love language, that they prefer people to speak to them, is like acts of service.
I actually think mine is one of those too. But like I think the older I get, the more it becomes that, right? Like I know that I'm a very
Yeah,
physical
that's what I was
person.
thinking.
Right. Like I'm a very physical touch person. I think that's a cultural thing with how I grew up, you know? And I know that like quality time, but like I think being ADHD is part of it. And I think that like running around and like I know I can do everything by myself, but you know, it's kind of like Faith says, like when you live in a world of unfinished things and like trying to do one thing while you're running late to something else. And like I tell people all the time, keep me up, lie to me by 45 minutes. Whatever time you want me there, lie to me by 45 minutes. Like, I encourage that shit. But I think, yeah, just like having people that know that. Like when I moved, my amazing friends, the Fab Five, and then like the Longs and Dendy showed up, and they just like put my place together because they knew I could literally live my whole entire lease out and never unpack and settle in. You know, like that could very much be a thing. I could literally live in boxes for a year. So I think having people that recognize that and having people that instead of kind of like beating you down about it, like lift you up about it, I think has been a game changer for all of us.
So, someone said you actually need to lie to Tug by 4 hours, not
Okay,
45 minutes. It's 4 hours.
did you let Felix in the chat?
Felix was in the chat. I think that
Can we ban that person? That's slander.
that was Kelly Beans.
That was Kelly Beans.
Kelly Beans was the hot
I
dropper on that
feel
one.
I feel hurt.
Oh yeah, then we got to ban him if you feel hurt. Um, cool. So the last question I'm gonna ask is a kind of a silly one, kind of a weird one. I always like to ask a kind of fun question at the end. If you could create one type of jelly bean that doesn't exist, what would it be? Like it can be like pizza or like turkey or something really gross like that, or it could be something awesome like I don't know. They probably have a lot of awesome ones already, but like what's a really weird jelly bean if you could create one that you would create?
Turkey jelly beans is a thing, by the way.
Oh, there are turkey jelly beans?
I could
Yeah, they put out like
Oh,
a full like Thanksgiving spread like a couple years. It's gross.
maybe you don't need to make up a new one. I was trying to think of like gross ones you could make up.
What am I
I
jelly
I
beans?
feel like now that they have like booger flavored jelly beans, like where do you go from there? Like they
Oh,
have they have vomit flavored jelly bean. Like where do you go from there?
I guess you
I
can't
hope
go anywhere.
nowhere. I hope nowhere, but
Okay, if you were to go see one animal in the zoo, what would be the animal you'd go see? Like if you were like you can only visit one exhibit, you can only see one animal here. What would be the animal you would go see at the zoo?
I've actually Kelly Beans and I have talked about this recently. So we
Oh,
discovered
wow, okay.
Yeah, Kelly Beans is Patrick Hill, by the way. The cat's never died.
Okay.
So so we were at Origins recently, Matt, and did you know we missed this opportunity, you guys? We missed this opportunity at the freaking zoo in Columbus, Ohio. There's an exhibit, and you have to pay. I think it's like I don't know, it's like $100 or something. But you can go and you can spend like 45 minutes hugging and hanging out with red pandas.
What? No
Yeah.
way.
So
That's
next
amazing.
next Origins, schedule that shit because if you think I'm not gonna hug a red panda, you're all crazy.
Yeah, seriously. Absolutely. That would be a awesome thing.
God, if you're up there, I need this to go exactly and the only way this could possibly go with one of us going to the hospital because of a red panda injury.
No, we're gonna kidnap one though for sure. We
We're
are not
not
red panda
kidnapping a
parents.
fucking red panda. Let me tell you. Two, we've already talked about
I can't wink, but
you're winking, but this is literally a live stream, Katie.
oh,
It's fine. My animal is probably gonna be the sloth because I've fallen in love with them. Look at that face. So I would go
Oh.
see the sloths and watch them for hours.
We have a
Do
sloth
nothing.
in the Knoxville Zoo, but I've never. Well, I've seen it like so. It's like way up in this tree thing. Like I don't know, but
Hmm.
it like can go all around inside on its own. Katie knows what I'm talking about. It can go around
Hmm.
on the inside on its own, but I never actually see it. Like I can sometimes see its hairy butt, and that's about all I get.
Yep.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you all for spending some time with
Thanks
me.
for having us,
Thanks.
Matt.
I very much appreciate you, and thank you everybody who tuned in and checked out. If you want to, click that little heart, give us a follow. If you have Amazon Prime, you can give us a free subscription, or you can give us a subscription anyway and pay for it. But it's up to you guys. But I loved having you all here, and I will talk to you all later. Thanks for being here.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Matt.
Matt.